Title: Static. Written by Kawaii Deku. You couldn't bear to stick around much longer after that. Every glance felt loaded for some reason, and you craved some quiet solitude to think. After bidding them all a polite goodnight, and you four went to the bedroom and instead began pacing the gardens, there was far too much on your mind for you to sleep. Or really, it was just one glaring thing. The strange excitement swirling into your stomach from earlier had turned to stone, and now every gaze that lingered on him for too long felt traitorous. You held no illusions that you were special to Zenitsu, in spite all of his signals sternly pointing to the contrary. He treated all girls like this. There were times you even felt bad for your host. The patient old woman must have never had a moment's peace, for he pestered Nezuko by night and you by day, and also sometimes by night. It really all depended on when the tender walls of romance from his heart. Each time a wave of courtship rituals befell you, he seemed kind enough to not play favorites. When he went picking wildflowers, Nezuko always received a matching one to yours, except the one time. But you thought it was safe to assume he would have gone back to retrieve another had he not been riven with insatiable itching. You used to postulate that he had a long-term plan to see which one of you he could wear down first and propose to. But after a while, the theory struck you as absurd. You quickly realized that he genuinely adored you both as much as he claimed, which you couldn't help but find sweet, at least during the times you didn't find it tiresome. But then, you don't remember the last time you found it tiresome. Even Tanjiro had picked up on this fact a while back, and seemed more hesitant to interfere in Zenitsu's pursuit of you, opting for keeping a more watchful distance instead. This highly contradicted the more hands-on approach he took while defending Nezuko from his devices. But that was to be expected from a big brother. Although despite his efforts, Zenitsu had yet to step out of line with her recently. While he read she was feeling generous, he'd give her a cheerful greeting and extend his head for pats, just as he had moments ago. But somehow, it took you until this evening to notice that she had never once been shocked. Was he just more careful with her? Nezuko possesses an undeniably statuesque beauty. Her long flowing hair and big round eyes were striking. Surely that was the reason she was the favorite. You could accept that, right? No, it was upsetting for you for some reason. That fact threw all of your preconceived notions about him to the wolves. It's just downright rude, you thought bitterly, to allow a lady to be shocked because he's too lazy to keep it under control. A scoff escaped your throat. Or maybe he and the guys get a laugh out of it. No, you were definitely getting ahead of yourself. At the very least, you knew Tanjiro would never do that. And the other two never struck you as intentionally malicious. Either way, you couldn't let this go unaddressed. You needed an explanation. You sucked in a big puff of air, trying to hype yourself up for the confrontation, and stormed back to the boys' room. You heard them quietly chatting, which meant they weren't asleep. Zenitsu, would you come outside? I need to speak with you. What did you do? You heard Tanjiro whisper, though you were sure he didn't mean for it to sound as accusatory as it did. He just assumed based on a strain in your tone that something was amiss, though no one picked up your vocal waver more strongly than Zenitsu himself. Sure. He yelped out, and a scurrying of hasty footsteps approached. The instant the Fusuma parted, you felt your anger deflate in the reflection of his nervous amber eyes. You didn't have the heart to scold him, did you? Before you knew it, you had stripped over a soft spot for him that hadn't been there the last time you checked. Somehow, in the pale lavender clothes and ambient silver moonlight, he looked even more docile than usual. And it took you a moment of drinking in the gentle youth of his delicate features before you realized he was watching you expectantly, eagerly awaiting for your response. Do you want to go for a walk? He just nodded and shuffled outside to follow you. The silence was one of the loudest you'd ever experienced, and it lasted until you both made it a fair distance. You found yourself somewhere between the gardens and the bathhouse before you worked up the guts to speak. Unfortunately, the blonde seemed to be radiating skittish energy, which didn't help ease you into the conflict at all. Zenitsu, I wanted to ask you something. He halted his walk and turned to face you. about today, and also those other days. He swallowed thickly and began to sweat, knowing exactly the direction this conversation was heading. Um, are your hands alright? He asked meekly. Oh, yeah, they're fine. It felt as though we were bouncing anxiety off each other with each passing glance. After dinner, I noticed something. Noticed what? That spark thing you do. You didn't do it to Nesco. His eyes widened at your assessment. You seemed to hold it back just fine for her. So, am I not worth the effort? His fearful expression sank into a heartbroken one. Is that what you think? He saw the admittance in your eyes, and his own turned downcast. It's not that at all. Then, what is it? Zenitsu felt his nerves resurfacing when you weren't satisfied with his truthful but minimalistic answer. Well, my feelings towards the two of you are, different. Different how? It's just different. He shrieked out involuntarily like a cornered animal at the sudden volume change. That doesn't explain anything. Tell me, Zenitsu. Why do you shock me? Do you think it's funny or something? No, of course not. His jaw set and his posture stiffened. His panic was approaching fever pitch, and it was all he could do to not start shaking. Zenitsu wasn't ready for this. Then why? Why is it just me? Um, he startled when his back met the outer wall of the bathhouse. He hadn't even noticed himself instinctively recoiling from your demands. He shot darting glances around the perimeter, obviously searching for a way out of this. At this point, he'd even be grateful for Inosuke violently tackling him out of the vice of your scrutinizing gaze. It's, because... Well, you urged him, and his face turned redder than the first flower he ever picked for you, and also the resulting rashes that followed. I can't I can't control my breathing around you. At last, after a strenuous effort, the truth began to tiptoe out of Zenitsu's mouth, albeit at the cost of him fidgeting like crazy and looking everywhere but directly at you. It's kind of hard to explain, so, um, go on. A hand reached out and gently gripped his arm, an attempt to make you feel grounded again, because he couldn't possibly be able to say what you longed for him to say. What little composure he had left faltered somewhat at the contact. Your unblinking eyes were intense upon him, but they showed no trace of the judgment he expected. Well, it's sort of deeper, you know? And it's sort of like that feeling I had the day I got hit by lightning, but in my heart and stuff. Zenitsu's voice got quieter and shyer with every word. Your stomach flipped. That was a confession, and by the end of it, you were certain you must have been smiling wider than the horizon. You know, Zenitsu, I always believed the heavens were correcting a mistake that day. He tilted his head. Your hair and eyes were certainly always meant to match the true color of your own heart. A flicker of light dashed around him in a bolt, and he took a big step backward to preserve your safety. Don't say things like that. He wrung his fingers and tucked his chin coyly, cut flushed reaching all the way to his ears. I don't deserve that much. You do, though. You took his hand in yours, giving your best effort to keep him from trembling. You deserve all the good things in life that come to you. You are the sweetest boy I've ever met. Probably the most thoughtful as well. Whether it's your intention or not, you always manage to make me feel special. His lips parted in awe as you poured out your emotions to him, and he swore his heart was fluttering faster than Chuntaro's wings. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I am falling for you, Zenitsu. Or rather, I think I already have. Wyan-chan. Your name fell breathlessly from his lips. His eyelids grew heavy as your face inched closer to his. He craned his neck forward to close the distance, but just before his affections were returned, he heard your voice. Don't shock me. He nodded swiftly, and the motion began again. The instant your bottom lip brushed his, he sighed. A tsunami swell of devotion filled his chest and overwhelmed him. Then, you recoiled back and wrinkled your nose. Amidst his string of numerous apologies, you swore. You smelled the sharp scent of your eyebrows singeing. Your lips held a peculiar tingling sensation, the buzzing of lots of bees, and you ran a finger over them. I'm so sorry. Tears sprinkled the corners of his eyes. I can get it right and again. Huh? He balked when he heard your demand. You really wanted to kiss him a second time after that? Zenitsu felt the iconic shift when the adrenaline flared in his heart once more. To you, it seemed like the air around him was vibrating, a fitting reflection to the electricity thrumming in your veins right now. You braced yourself as the dance of love began again. The tiniest spark surged against your mouth, hovering only an inch away from his, but this time it vanished as quickly as it came. His warm breath fanned your cheeks before you finally able to feel the softness of his lips against your own. Before long, he melted into the kiss and like snow on summer grass, and his hands cupped your face with gentleness and only a heart as tender as Zenitsu's could manage. You tightened the embrace, forcing him ever close to you, and a cute little mew escaped his throat. You could hear the happiness in it when he sneaked his arms around you and your hands tangled up in his hair. Maybe it was just obvious, or perhaps you were learning to read him as well as he could read you. Finally, the two of you parted, but he didn't release you from his arms. He just held you there, and you were content to let yourself get lost for a while in those gorgeous, half-lidded golden eyes. Your fingers absent-mindedly played with the hem of his silken lilac robe. Next to where the beer of his chest was peeking through, rising and falling much faster than before, and it was while he was catching his breath that you noticed something you choose not to comment on, for fear it would ruin the moment. Though in your opinion, it only served to make it more perfect. The effect of Zenitsu's pent-up surge had caused his hair to stand on end. He must have reversed his internal current in order to avoid shocking you, and this was the hilarious result. It essentially looked like a firework had gone off in his face, minus the suit, sending his locks in every unnatural direction. He returned your big smile blissfully unaware of his disheveled appearance. He covered his mouth to prevent the sinful breeze from stealing your warmth from his lips, and to prevent the feeling as long as he could. Your beloved suddenly started wiggling his body like a jovial earthworm, like he would burst from excitement. It should have, if something didn't happen soon. What that something was you didn't know. But then you heard it echo over the grounds, truly waking every resident and guest in the Hysteria household. Why, andyan?